Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Humblefish and Friends. And today I'm here with Kenny. And Kenny, I guess we'll just start off like, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us before we start talking about High Tide Aquatics, just introduce yourself to the audience and just tell us some things about yourself.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Kenny, uh, High Tide Aquatics. I own it, obviously. Hobby, freshwater fish before that, and jump in the saltwater world in junior high and never looked back. Um, been keeping reef tanks since, I guess, 15. Started quarantining my own fish maybe 6, 7 years ago, just because I was sick of getting velvet and brook and all that terrible stuff. Um, yeah, I was a tattooer for almost 20 years, and I opened up this store um, a year ago.
Okay. Maybe tell us. I remember we talked a little bit before about the reasons that you wanted to get into this specifically into you wanted to sell quarantine fish. Tell us about that. Like what motivated you to start this business? Because it's not an easy business to be in.
No, not at all. And I've learned that quickly. But so for me, it was just the lack of education behind what quarantining was and the beneficial factors of it when buying a fish from a retail store, because they don't tell you about that kind of stuff. And buying from retail stores, you take that gamble. And, that's what I did for years and years and years. And most of the time, you have great luck. Then you buy an algae blending, it wipes out all your expensive fish with velvet or brook and all that stuff. So I felt like having a retail store that focused on quarantining fish, providing healthy specimens, and not just quarantine fish, not cyanide caught fish. I try all my fish come from Quality Marine. I get most of them max certified. I try to get 100% of my fish caught without cyanide. But then the quarantine factor, I just felt like it was an important thing to introduce to people locally that didn't have, the means or the knowledge about quarantine vendors that ship, like, our other vendors online here.
Okay. And where and like just because we'll probably repeat this, but like where your business is, High Tide Aquatics, and where are you located?
I'm in Oakland, California,
Okay. And
which is right across the bridge from San Francisco.
okay. And what's the website?
It's hightideaquatics.net.
Okay, hightideaquatics.net. So, people right now that might be watching this, maybe they want to, start looking on your website, looking at fish and everything. So why don't you maybe so run us through the process. You've got boxes of fish that come in from Quality Marine from the wholesaler. What is your process? I guess we'll start first with acclimating the fish. How do you acclimate those fish into your quarantine systems?
So I got a pretty cool little setup with Quality Marine. They're based in LA. I'm in Oakland. So I put in my orders for fish. They I'll be bagging them up around noon, and they jump on a plane around 3 in the afternoon. I pick them up around 6:30, which is usually about half an hour, 40 minutes after they land. Um, and I bring them to the shop. Acclimation process is water transfer method for about 40 minutes. I, take out about 20% of the water, add the quarantine system water to it about every 10 minutes until it's, almost 100% of quarantine system water. Then I start transferring them over. But from Quality Marine systems into my systems, it's like an 8-hour process.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That I don't think you could get any faster than that, unless you're picking stuff up locally, which I have local suppliers here, but, I choose to get from Quality Marine for the reasons I mentioned, previously.
Right. They're a good wholesaler. Yeah. And they've got an
Yeah.
awesome selection of fish as well.
Yeah.
So the fish are in quarantine. How do you describe your quarantine process, like, in detail, like how do you, what
Yeah.
medications you use, how long, how do you quarantine the fish?
So the day they go in, I got copper at 1.75, and they get transferred into that system. And over the next couple hours, it's raised to 2.0, and that's the end of the night for them. I go home as well. It's my end of the night because I pick up the fish usually about 6:30 at night. And then over the next 2 days, that gets raised up to 2.5. So, day 2, it goes to 2.25. Day 3, it goes to 2.5. Day after that is the day I start a 10-day formalin countdown. So they get 10 days of formalin dosing. And on day 1, they get dosed with praziquantel to deal with internal parasites, internal bacterial infections. They get prazi on day 7. And then they're in therapeutic copper that whole time for 16 days at therapeutic level. And then water change is done, carbon's put in the system, clean time, and then they're in those tanks for about 2-3 days before customers start coming to pick up their fish, before I move them out to the retail systems.
Okay. And the copper you're using, I think, is copper power, correct?
Copper power.
Okay. So for those who just, there's some people watching this that aren't familiar with what drugs do what. Copper treats thickened velvet. Formalin is treating Brooklinella and Uranema, and the praziquantel is treating flukes, black ick, things like that. So it's a full comprehensive quarantine protocol that you're putting on the fish.
As well as therapeutic, they're getting metronidazole and praziquantel in their foods mixed with focus 2 times a day during that whole quarantine process.
So you're treating then for internal parasites and intestinal worms.
Absolutely.
So it's so they're getting treated both externally and internally. That's important to know, and that's what I tell people. It's like when somebody tells you they're going to sell you quarantine fish, ask for details. Ask what medications are they using, how long, what are the therapeutic levels they're treating at. So you're cleaning the fish out inside and out. It sounds like.
I think we're hitting. No fish is going to be 99.9% bulletproof, but I think we're hitting about the 98.9% mark.
Right. Yeah. So do you ever encounter any problems? Sometimes there's fish that might get, say, a bacterial infection while you're treating them with copper and formalin, or there's prazi resistant flukes. There's things like that. What do you do when you encounter a fish that has like a secondary bacterial infection while you're treating them in quarantine?
They get pulled and isolated into a separate QT system, and then treat the bacterial infection prophylactically internally, as well as freshwater dips. I haven't came across the prazi resistant flukes yet. I'm thankful for that. For flukes, I do a lot of freshwater dips for flukes, as well as treating. But I think freshwater dips really help if they're bad on the fish. And fish can handle long freshwater dips. I do big tangs and big angels for 8, 9, 10 minutes sometimes.
Okay. Wow. I only recommend 5 minutes. So you find that angels and tangs are tolerant of longer freshwater dips?
The bigger ones.
The bigger ones. Okay. Yeah.
Not like little flame angels and stuff, but blue faces and stuff like that, and Achilles tangs and whatnot. Especially like those bigger fish get a little bit more prone to them because their scales are bigger.
Okay. That's awesome. What kind of foods do you feed in quarantine? Because that's always like a problem for a lot of people. They're trying to quarantine fish, and the fish just don't want to eat. So, what kind of foods do you offer in your quarantine?
So I start with what everybody in the store gets. I do a mix of mysis. I do a mix of brine. There's a mix of pellets, mix of flakes, noris. And if there's fish in QT that don't eat those, then jump down the rabbit hole of finicky fish. And I'll throw the kitchen sink at fish. until I get them to eat something. I'll baby them to death until until they eat.
You were telling me before, you were telling me about like, you know, purple queen anthias, which are I've had a very difficult time quarantining those little deep water anthias. And you were telling me about some tricks that you use to get those to eat. And I think that was great. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So as you know, a lot of people know, purple queens are extremely finicky. So what I found was a great method, and I'm going to shout out my buddy Matt Wandell at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. He's the one that told me about how to do this. I actually did a shoal of purple queens for him in his personal tank. So what you do in the QT tanks is put in air stones, and that will keep the food suspended in the water, because those anthias aren't going to they're not going to eat foods that drop to the bottom of the tank. So if you're dropping these little micro foods in there, it's going to keep them suspended in the water column for longer periods of time, keep them from rolling across the bottom and rotting away. I will try various reef nutrition products like the Arctopods, the Pack Pods, Tigger Feast, the ROE eggs. Most of the time I can get them on that stuff. And last resort, I'll take clams and bring them to a little Parmesan cheese grater and use shaved clam meat. Usually they're going to get going, especially with those air stones. That's highly important with a lot of fish that won't eat food off the bottom. You know, just keeping it suspended in the water column longer periods of time is going to be more beneficial for those fish to be able to eat.
Those are great tips. I mean, those are things. So basically it's like, you just kind of keep trying. I mean, you have to have a lot of different assortment of foods available, and you keep trying and trying, and eventually you're going to find something that they eat, and then you can then transition them to other foods once they start eating.
And then the other important thing is stress. You know, I can't stress that enough, is you can throw the kitchen sink at fish, but if they're in an environment that's stressing them out, they're not going to eat anything you're throwing at them. You know, so a low stress environment, especially for finicky fish, is important.
So what steps do you take to reduce stress for fish in your quarantine systems? Like, I don't know, are you just using like the PVC elbows? Are you using like plastic plants? Like, what are the things that you can do to reduce stress in quarantine?
You know, we'll do a little walkthrough, but all my tanks, they have live rocks in them. You know, obviously it's not live anymore, but rocks and PVC tubes. And then certain fish get put in certain tanks without certain types of fish in there that are going to stress them out.
Okay, so it's all about fish compatibility. You're not going to put like anthias in with triggers or large angles, things like that, that aggressive fish that are going to stress them out during quarantine.
Same thing with the copper bands. Like, I don't mix copper bands with big tangs and stuff like that, because I don't want anybody bullying the copper bands, because it's hard enough to get them to eat, let alone if they're getting bullied. So even the bigger ones.
So what are some tips and tricks for quarantining copper band butterflies? That's one that everybody has a hard time with. What do? You know, how do you quarantine your copper bands?
I mean, it's kind of the same thing along the purple queen aspect, you know, is throwing as much foods as you can at them. You know, that shaved clam meat deal, I learned that from Matt Wandell as well. So shout out again. But that shaved clam meat, there's something about it that is magical. As soon as it hits the water, fish are like, you know.
Did you use a Parmesan cheese grater you take the meat, you just kind of
make quesadillas with or whatever. You know, you got that other side that has like the fine grating that shreds it.
Yeah.
And you do that, and it will shred that clam meat just like really, really fine. And they will go for that. You know, and if you really want to get into a realm of putting a piece of broccoli with some clam meat and stuff like that in there, and they kind of simulate picking stuff out of rock. That's another angle. Matt Wandell did a talk here on expert fish care, and he covers copper band butterflies, he covers purple queens. It's a very informative talk, and I learned a lot about the expert fishes, you know, that people label as expert fish, and they really aren't. It's just about learning what those fish need.
Right. So do you have any tips and tricks about wrasses, especially like leopard wrasses and whatever? I mean, those are another fish that people find are very challenging to quarantine. How do you?
Leopard wrasses, sand beds, of course. So I have sand beds and QT tanks specifically for wrasses. I don't have sand beds in all of them, but majority of them do it specifically for the wrasses. So I mean, if you're doing leopards, you have to have a sand bed. And then same deal. They're going to be finicky. They're going to be picky. So I will drop food. Same thing with the anthias. Same thing with the copper bands. I have a little chair in my QT room. I drop the foods in there, sit back, about 8 feet, 10 feet away, and they get, my eye on them that whole time. And if they're not eating certain things, then I try something else. And, I keep doing it.
Okay.
So a variety of foods is, important because they're going to eat something eventually if they're not being stressed out.
So just persistence. You just have to keep trying stuff until you find what works. Exactly. Okay, so the fish are in quarantine, and then retail, and then they're for sale. How do you prevent cross contamination that's what I find interesting in a local fish shop retail setting. Like most of the vendors on my forum, they have like a dedicated facility, and basically they're not dealing with customers. They're quarantining fish, and then they're putting them into like observation tanks and then shipping them directly. But you actually have to deal with customers that come in and buy the fish. You have to bag the fish up and all that. How do you prevent cross contamination?
For me, I'm a one-man show here, so it makes it a lot easier without having employees that are putting hands here and there and tank to tank. And so it's just me I have to worry about. So I come from, I mentioned before, I've been a tattooer for almost 20 years, and the cross-contamination of bloodborne pathogens in that industry is a very scary thing because you can get, anything and everything from people's blood. So cross-contamination has always been in my background. So everything that is used for, let's say, this display tank, a scraper, a net, that doesn't get used on anything else. And same thing with every system in here. Everything gets, it has its own things that get used. And if, sometimes you have to do the dirty hand, clean hand thing, technique. But yeah, cross-contamination is very important with dealing with this at a retail level. And not only do I have quarantine fish, I have a whole coral room, and, I'm a reef store. So it's a lot going on inside here.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like it's just basically being mindful and very careful and, to prevent the cross contamination.
And just having that in the back of your head at all times, that one drop of water is, the chance of it happening from one drop of water, it's probably in the thousands to millions, whatever, but that chance of one drop of water could jeopardize the whole entire deal that we're doing here.
Right. Murphy's Law, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And I love that people are hearing this because I love that they're getting to listen to you, and they're hearing somebody that is mindful of things like that you're super careful, that you're telling us, because one of my pet peeves in this industry is people that don't share information. They're like, well, I'm going to sell you quarantine fish, but I'm not going to tell you, what I'm treating with or any, so I love it that you are just being completely transparent, and you're just telling us, look, this is what I do step by step, and I'm mindful of cross-contamination, and I just think that's awesome. That's amazing.
I also list my protocol on the website. Obviously it's not in depth as this conversation is, but it has like the vast details of it.
Right.
Another thing too about my retail system is after the fish come out of QT, they go into my sales floor tanks, which are back over there.
Okay.
And those sales floor tanks, I don't have copper in them. I don't have hyposalinity. Everything in here runs at reef level at 1.026 salinity. My quarantine systems run at 1.026. So a customer bringing a fish home from here and acclimating it to their system, they don't have to bring them up with salinity, which is really hard on fish. So, there's no drip acclimation, just a couple little water transfer method, and your fish are popping right in. And the fact that I'm back there with them for 3 weeks, almost a month, they're getting used to people coming up to the tanks and feeding them and having interaction with me cleaning the tanks and all that stuff. So usually when you drop a fish in your tank, these guys are kind of swimming around already. And then, not having copper in those systems is important, I think, because those guys went through enough.
Right.
They went through a full QT protocol, which is enough. Fish don't need to sit in copper for long periods of time. If you see a fish at a retail store that's been there 6 months, it's been in copper for 6 months. That's going to, long term, it's causing negative effects on those fish.
Right. They're going to start to get HLLE. They could get, copper is an immunosuppressive, so they can start getting like bacterial infections and all that. And then I like what you touched upon because, okay, so you're getting a clean fish, you're getting a quarantine fish that has been treated with all these different medications, but then you're also getting an eating fish when they buy from you, and you can tell the customer, customer comes in and buys a copper band, you can tell the customer these are the foods that this copper band eats. So, I mean, you have that, to take, to take home and everything. And also you're getting a fish that you don't have to do a drip acclimation with, because a lot of times when you buy fish, either from a local fish store or online vendor, sometimes the salinity is like 1.020, something like that. Most people, we keep our reef tanks at, 1.026. When they buy fish from you, it's already at the right salinity to match their display tank. And that's huge.
Makes it easier to fish.
Yeah. So you're getting a disease-free fish. You're getting a fish that has been eating. You know what the fish is eating, and you're getting a fish at the same salinity as what you probably have your DT at. So that just makes it such an easy process, to put in your display tank. I would have people that would, when I sold quarantine fish, I would ship the fish to them, and they told me within an hour the fish is it's not hiding, it's out, it's eating nori, it's eating mysis, whatever. It's like it's been in the tank like for months.
And I think that goes to us doing this quarantine process and being with those fish for, not just a day and flipping them, that from an importer and then selling them the next day. We're there with those fish for, like I said, almost a month, maybe enough. Like they're my pets until they get adopted by somebody else, and they get treated like they're my pets.
That's awesome. That's an awesome attitude to have. And I think people don't really quite realize in some situations when they buy a fish, unless they buy from like a quarantine vendor like yourself, the last meal that fish had was the last meal it had in the ocean before it got caught. So you're getting a fish that's malnourished, its immune system is compromised because it is malnourished, but then stressed out. But when you're buying from someone like yourself, you're getting a quarantine conditioned fish that is eating. It's had at least 2 or 3 weeks of meals in it. The stress levels are down. The salinity's right. I mean, it just gives you a much better chance of success putting this fish in your display tank.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and for years, because like I've been doing this for years now, and I still have customers that will reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, remember that fish I bought from you 4 or 5 years ago? It's still doing great, And I mean that's what it's about. That's what we're trying to accomplish here is long-term success with these animals.
These are special animals.
Yeah.
They're special. That's all I can say.
Awesome. So I know you said you wanted to give us like a tour of both your quarantine room and the retail room and everything. So
I want to check out my displays real quick and have a glance at the coral room, and then we could jump into the fish stuff.
Yeah, great. That sounds awesome. Yeah.
So I'm going to have my girlfriend help me out here for a sec.
Tell her we said thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Can you guys can see. So yeah, there's some food there. There's the front door, but I got all the curtains closed.
Okay. You sell a lot of reef nutrition, I see, huh?
A lot of reef nutrition, a lot of frozen stuff like LRS, Rod's Foods, meat, mysis, all that good stuff. And then this is This is the 150 display. This guy was set up 1 year ago, just after I opened.
Oh, it's beautiful, man.
That was set up with all dry rock and had fish, coral, and inverts in there first week, and everything's been thriving since. No uglies.
Oh, very nice. That's beautiful. A peninsula tank, huh?
Yeah, this is a peninsula. It's my first peninsula, which I love. And then this is a 100-gallon display. It's actually a 112. It's a Red Sea 112. That guy is 2 years old this month.
Oh, nice. I love how clean your tanks look, you know? And I love you got that wave action with the wave makers at the top. That's really awesome.
Yeah. This is kind of SPS dominant. So there's 2 empty 40s on the front, and there's 2 gyres down that overflow that shoot down the back wall, kick stuff around. This is my retail fish system. So there's 6 20-gallons up top, 4 40s down at the bottom. And what I do every time I bring fish out, you can see the dates. So all of my fish get dated individually the day they came out of QT.
Okay.
So you can know how long I've had those fish here.
You know what I love? Your fish aren't hiding. They're out in the open, almost like they're begging to be fed. That's, to me, a sign of a healthy fish. When they're not hiding, they're socialized, too.
With a big computer and a weird-looking guy in front of them. All right, let's have a little walk into the coral room real quick. This is my front desk area.
Okay. You have a nice shop.
Thank you. These are all my inverts here.
Okay.
These are all my coral tables, which you can't really see. It's all the blue. You might be able to see this guy. This is another display tank I just set up. It's an innovative marine 50-gallon lagoon.
Okay.
Love that tank. And then now we could dive into the QT room.
Okay. The magic room.
Let me turn the light. So this is my QT room. Maybe I could take this for a second. So I don't have any fish in here right now because everything just got switched out. Okay. So this is one system here.
And it's it's far away from the retail room, so we don't have to worry about all transmission and all that other stuff.
Correct. This is another system which just finished around, and this system is just started getting water changed today and started getting cleaned out for next batch of fish coming in.
Okay, so the systems are all tied together. It looks like on one sump. Like one.
This system is separate, and the other system is separate.
Okay, so you have 2 different systems.
But then all these can be isolated.
Ah, okay. I see that.
This system cannot be isolated.
Okay.
I usually have my little calendar that I keep track of all my med stuff. Meds here.
Okay, yep.
And got to show you my library real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most people don't realize that's how we did it back in the day before, internet and forums and search engines. You just had to pick up a book and do some research.
Right.
I like that you have a couch so people can just kind of sit and relax and like,
That's a little lounge area there. So, people come with their families, and that's a good place for people to chill out while we do our reef and stuff.
Awesome. And you seem like a real, personable kind of guy. So it's probably your customers come in and, they just chat you guys, you talk about stuff. We talked about that earlier. Some local fish store owners don't have that personality, to interact with their customers.
Yeah. This is something I love to talk about. So when people come in and start talking about their tanks, and they're here for an hour and a half, I could talk reef tanks. I could talk fish. I could talk all that stuff all day long. I love it. It drives me. It's a huge passion. That's why I'm doing this. You know, and the education. The education is so important for customers. You know, you don't find that every shop you go to. You know, like forums, stuff like that. But then you go on the internet and get down this rabbit hole of like all this misinformation. So I think it's important to guide customers, you know, the right way and educate them how to maintain and have these fish for long periods of time. And, you know, they should die of old age.
Yes, definitely. So you said your store is in Oakland. What's the address exactly? Because, you know, if people are watching this, I want them to know exactly where to go. What is your address in Oakland?
So my address is 2819 MacArthur Boulevard. It's in the Diamond District in Oakland, California. All that's on the website at hightideaquatics.net. And I also have an Instagram. It's High Tide Aquatics Oakland. Same with Facebook. And I also have a YouTube channel, High Tide Aquatics Oakland as well.
Okay, so that's your social media and the address and how people, you know, to get in touch with you. So let's say I'm a, you know, look, I'm in the Bay Area and I'm like, man, this is who I want to buy my stuff from. So to buy quarantine fish for you, how does that work? Do you is it first come first serve? Can you make special requests, special orders? How does that work exactly?
So yeah, in the fish systems you saw there's fish in there. So all those are open to first come first serve basis. All my fish that I have currently in stock, they're all up on my website. I try to update it every day, but sometimes things slip, you know, life. But usually every other day they're updated of what I have in stock, ready to go if you come in the store today. If I don't have what you're looking for, I have a special request form online. So you go on the website, you submit a special request form, whatever fish you're looking for, I get back to you with pricing. After that's done, you get half a deposit down, and that guarantees you a fish. So you're going to get a healthy eating specimen, whether you're ordering a copper band or purple queen anthias or anything like that. Once you give a deposit, you're guaranteed those fish. You know, whether if I have to go through 100 of those fish, you're going to get, you know, the fish that you ordered.
Okay.
So hopefully I don't have to go through 100 of any fish, but I'm not doing green chromis here, so.
Yeah, those are difficult with Uranema. Yeah, it's should be such an easy fish. Used to be an easy fish, but not anymore.
Just QTing them in general. I haven't seen they can stand it.
Yeah, they kind of like they fight and try to kill each other. So you know what I found with them kind of works sometimes, because I mean I used to actually quarantine a lot of chromis. Quarantine them with a predator fish, not a predator that's going to actually eat them, but like a really like put a big like emperor angel in there, or like one of those like a pink tail trigger, something that's not actually going to eat them, but something that they're just scared shitless of. And what they will do is they will all then shoal together, and it's like they're no longer worried about fighting amongst themselves because they're more worried about this big fish that they perceive as a predator.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but then you got the whole Uranema thing, which I mean they're just like carriers for Uranema, and they can just cause havoc that way, and you know, so that's kind of another problem.
White straight poop, man, all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a I get it. Yeah, it's a lot of people will not quarantine chromis anymore. So we talked a lot about the fish. Let's talk a little bit about your corals, because you sell corals too. So what type of corals do you sell? Can you tell us something about your corals?
Yeah, I mean, I sell anything and everything from, you know, zoanthids, gorgonians to SPS, torches, endophilia, canthophilia. I mean, everything, anywhere in between. I have specific tables set up for specific things. I have corals that are segregated for like beginners, you know, that has a lot of like softies and zoanthids and mushrooms and stuff like that. So yeah, I kind of cater to everybody. There's a lot of high-end SPS as well, like name stuff, you know, down to $10 GSP.
Okay, so something for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are these, and I don't think they are these corals, are they quarantined or these corals are not quarantined? Okay.
No.
So people,
So I do not quarantine my corals, and I do not quarantine my inverts. My inverts and corals, my inverts are on a fishless system with 0 fish in them. No fish have ever been in there. My coral system, there are fish in there. You need fish in there. It's a coral system. So, you got to treat it like a reef tank. You need pest control. You need algae predators. But those fish have been with me for a long period of time. And the fish that haven't been with me before this store, they went through quarantine. So, there hasn't been new fish added in there in a year. So,
Okay.
But those, went through quarantine. So I don't worry about, my own, but you never know if, something could come in on a coral.
So very low risk with your corals. Somebody wanted to be super safe, just set up a fishless frag tank, put it in there for 6 weeks. And, then it would be, closer to 100% certain that they would not get, because again, some people don't realize that like Ick and velvet, the tomotes can actually be on corals and invert. So, those need to be isolated to a fishless environment for 6 weeks.
Except for like sea hares and urchins.
Right. Yep. Our starfish too. Starfish can't. They can't insist to starfish either.
I just rinse them off with tank water. I'll do a couple dips, and I'll do like a 3-bucket dip in tank water, and then they go in.
So
but, the inverts that are in my retail fish system, those were quarantined. Because in that system, like I said, there's no copper. There's urchins, there's planer shrimp, there's hermit crabs, there's tropis snails, there's all that good stuff in there.
Right. Okay.
But we're all QT'd, so
that's good to know. So what is like, I guess, what's your vision for the future? You're I know we were talking earlier. Well, I guess I want to ask you too, what is like your success rate with the fish? Do you have like some rough numbers? Because a lot of people probably wonder about, like, well, you quarantine these fish and everything. What is your success rate with the fish that you bring in? You get them through quarantine and into retail. Like, what are those numbers like? What's the percentage?
Yeah. So as a hobbyist, in the beginning, it was hit or miss, because good quarantine is good, bad quarantine is not good.
Right.
You're doing quarantine wrong. It's bad for the fish. You could over medicate them, damage their organs, and if you're doing it wrong, you're slipping. You're getting stuff slipping through.
Right.
So yeah, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I was just asking what your success rate was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, I was going down that road, and then I got better at it, and I got better at it because of your forum. I started going on Humblefish. I learned what Humblefish was. I've been a member of a local reef club for 18 years now, Bay Area Reefers. So I think I stumbled across Humblefish through that forum. And then I absorbed a lot more information about how to do quarantine successfully. And then as a hobbyist, it was like, 100%.
Right.
Plus the fish came in like bad off the bat. And then on the retail level, it was kind of a different story off the bat, because the amount of fish I was bringing in. I wasn't, as a hobbyist, doing 2 or 3 fish isn't like doing 150 fish.
Nope.
So my loss rate in the beginning was 10 to 15%, which I think is way too high. There's nights that, I shed tears. I hate losing fish. They mean a lot.
I understand.
So, but now, after I got things dialed in and learned how to bring in this amount of fish on this level, and also doing it with 2 systems usually I'll have each system kind of flip-flop, because I get a lot of special orders. So I need enough fish out on my retail floor, but I also need to order those special orders. So it's a unique little balancing act, or juggling, however you call it, of keeping enough fish out on the retail floor and satisfying the special orders. But now I got it down to about, I want to say about like 3%.
Wow, that's amazing, man.
Which, like 3 to 5, 5 is my threshold. Like if there's anything over 5, there's something wrong with your water, with your system, or what you're doing. I think 5% should be no more than 5%.
So your quarantine success rate is about at least 95% now, you're saying?
Area, yeah. For sure.
That's awesome. I mean, that's just, I mean, hey, hats off to you. That's an amazing success rate. That's really awesome. But, like you said, you know what? Quarantining is like anything else. People try to quarantine and they fail at it in the beginning. But, the more you do it, you get experience. You start figuring out what works, what doesn't. Look, I'm sure most people, the first time they tried to grow acros, they couldn't do it, right? But just like everything else, it just takes time. It just takes time to learn the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts, and to kind of figure out what works best for you, so that you can increase your success rate.
Right, of course, and it also helps with the process and where I'm getting my fish from. Quality Marine goes through extra protocol to make sure their fish are good before they ship them out. And then the fact that the fish leave their systems and into my systems in about 8 hours, like that's just so much less stress on the fish. So I think there's all these things in place, and then myself getting, the proper advice along the way, from people like yourself, my friends Matt Wandell and Richard Ross. And I get a lot of advice from people that I highly respect, and I absorb it like a sponge, and I spread it out to everybody else that comes in here as well.
Right. So like getting information from all these different sources, and it's like you said, you absorb it, and then it's like, it just all, I mean, every little bit of information helps you succeed and do things a little bit better.
Yeah. People that don't listen to podcasts, listen to podcasts. I listen to Rapping with Reef Fun, Reef Therapy, Reef Beef, like religiously. I've been through them all. You could absorb so much information watching your tutorial videos, these live streams. The more information you could absorb as a hobbyist is going to further your success rate in that tank.
Right. Exactly. That's why we're doing these, trying to, help educate hobbyists. So what is your, I guess, what do you envision for the future for,
the future? It's only been a year, but what I'm looking forward to is getting an employee so I can have a day off. I'm here 7 days a week, man. I'm closed 1 day a week, but I'm here doing water changes and, shopping for the store and restocking. So yeah, in the future, an employee would be nice, a day or two. But, I love what I do. It'd be hard to be away from here for a day or two, but I need it. I need it for this,
How do you take a vacation? How do you go anywhere? You don't, right?
There's been no vacations. I did have, so last year I had 3 days off. I had some people cover me one day, and then, both those times I had 2 separate people covering for those 3 days that I was gone last year. Wow. But at 3 different times.
So you got 1 day, 3 different times.
It wasn't 3 days in a row.
Wow. That's the thing. I think people need to hear this, because, people are like, why should I pay more for quarantine fish? And it's like, well, first off, you're taking all the risk, like you said, it doesn't matter how many fish, if you get a bad order or whatever, they're going to get their fish. You're taking all the risk, you're like, it's all the medications, which are not, to use the right medications. They're not cheap. They're expensive. It's all the salt water and the water changes, and it's your time. Time is money. And from what I'm hearing from you, you're working 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And, you've got overhead, you've got to pay your bills. So people, the reason you have to pay more.
Too.
What's that?
I have 2 kids as well. So, it's a busy life.
So people need to understand that. I mean, I get a little frustrated when people tell me that quarantine fish are too expensive, because since I did it myself, I know the work you're going through. I know the sacrifices that you're making and the hard work and all of the physical manual labor that you have to do to make it work, especially as a one-man operation. That was one of the reasons my wife kind of made me get out of it. She's like, we can't go anywhere. We can't take vacations. We can't do anything.
Right.
So yeah, man, so thank you for your sacrifice that you're making to make this available to people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I hear that same thing from my girlfriend all the time about, hey, when are we going to go somewhere?
Right.
But it's coming. It's coming. You know, like we just put everything. When you open a business, you put everything you have into it. But like this type of business is a different story because you're dealing with live animals that are very delicate live animals, and that need constant attention. You know?
Right.
So.
Exactly. So I'm gonna. Okay. So no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like the cost of QT fish. You know, like you said, there's so much time involved, and you know, we accept the loss, and we are taking the gamble for you. You know, because fish are coming in, and fish are coming sick. You know, they're getting shipped sick. So we take that risk out of the situation. You know, gambling with expensive fish, you know, and putting them in your tank, that it's not worth it.
Right.
And there's many aspects that go into the conditioning, like getting a conditioned, quarantined fish that is disease-free, eating, and is socially acclimated. What's $80 for algae blending instead of 40, or what's more importantly, how many times have people paid $60 for a copper band butterfly and tried 5 of them?
Right.
Never got one to eat. All of them perished. Or you get them to eat and they die 3 months later because they're caught with cyanide.
Right.
For $300, you get one that's not stressed, that's eating like a pig, and that's disease free. So, you know, I would say you get what you pay for, but it's kind of a different scenario in this situation. But yeah, don't gamble. It's you're gonna lose, and when you lose, it's a bad thing. And it's terrible to go fallow. It's terrible to go through velvet and lose all your pets in 3 days. You know.
And it's also for people. Look, you know what? There are people in this hobby that, for whatever reason, are good at quarantining. People that are not. Just like, look, you know, we all have our strengths and weaknesses in the hobby. Like me, well, my thing is quarantine, but I'm the last guy you want to ask about plumbing or how to, you know, build a tank stand. I mean, I don't know how to do that. So for people like, and the reason the point I'm trying to make is, I knew a guy, for example, he really wanted a Regal Angel. And I want to say he bought like 10 of them and killed every single one in quarantine before he would pay me whatever it was I wanted at the time to quarantine one Regal Angel for him. So it's one of those things where if you know, for people that are struggling with quarantine for whatever reason, it's not your thing, you don't have the time, or you're just not good at it for whatever reason, look, you know, it's worth it to pay someone like yourself to quarantine the fish for you, because you're going to get a fish that's going to live 5, 10, 15, 20 years in your display tank, you know, if you take care of it.
Yeah.
The tank crash, you know? So
yeah.
It's
with good husbandry, your fish should die of old age.
Exactly. Okay, so we got about 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask everyone listening.
Beef out real quick?
No, go ahead.
Can I just throw out a beef real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
People throw out the word QT all over the effing place. Like, that it drives me nuts. QT this, QT, oh, fish is in the QT system, QT. If you're not doing it right, don't call it QT.
Right.
You know, because you're misinforming beginning hobbyists that don't know about this stuff.
Yeah, no, totally.
Personal beef, sorry.
No, totally. You know, I don't know if you know, I wrote an article. It was like, what did I call it? How to tell a real quarantine vendor from I called it a half-baked quarantine vendor.
I read that.
And it was a weird thing, because when I first started quarantining fish, the only one who was doing it, I forget his name. So there was one other guy who kind of did it before I did it, and then I kind of did it, and then all of a sudden now it's like, and now everybody's doing it, right? Like quarantine has become like a catchphrase. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So, and it bugs me because then, like that's why I wanted to do this interview with you, because I wanted to show off a real deal quarantine vendor so people not only can, gain customers from this live stream, but I want people to see how it's done properly. And I want people to know the questions they need to ask, because just because, you're buying a quarantine fish from a local fish store or an online vendor, that does not mean you're actually getting a truly quarantined fish. So yeah, I share that beef with you. The whole
And,
quarantine is not.
and the whole half baked thing that could make it way worse. You know, you could start getting resistance,
Yes.
tolerance build up from cryptogarian and all that good stuff.
Right. Well, it's a good example. So a lot of vendors will not. We talk about therapeutic levels. Well, we know that like copper power, the therapeutic levels. I tell people nowadays, look, treat between 2.2, 2.3 parts per million. But there are a lot of like some quarantine vendors like, well, I'll just treat it 1 part per million. You're not actually eliminating ichor velvet from the fish. You're just, yeah, they're just going to be an asymptomatic carrier at that point. So yeah, it's the devil's in the details. That's all I can say. So I want to ask, okay, so we got about 10 minutes to go.
Yeah,
I'm just asking, like, if anybody that's watching, if you got any questions for either myself or for Kenny, if you get it into the live chat, I'll ask Kenny the question. So while people are getting their questions, Kenny, you have any like kind of final thoughts? Anything else you'd like to share with us before we go to the Q&A?
No, I just kind of wanted to spit all that beef. And then, yeah, it's been awesome, Bobby. What you do is great for this industry, and informing people when people don't know what's wrong with their fish, having that availability of somebody being able to post a picture saying what's wrong with my fish, and you personally usually respond darn near every person's post on there, which is hats off to you, man. Like that's really cool that you're able to do that.
Thank you. Yeah. So anybody, if you got a fish disease question or problem, or really anything you want to talk about reef related, the forum is humble.fish. And you can post videos, you can post pictures. We talk about everything on there. And either myself or I got to get I've got a lot of, there's not just myself, there are some other people on there that are our fish medics.
Shout out to Jeff too, Dirks. He's also another one of those that responds to everyone's,
yes.
questions and concerns.
And what's great? What's great about it, because sometimes like somebody will post something and I don't quite see the problem, and then someone like Jeff or Vince is another one. He'll be actually on the live stream next week.
Cool.
They'll come on and like they'll just see something I won't see, and they're like, "Hey, I think that fish has flukes. Give it a freshwater dip. Let's check for flukes." I didn't even see it, so it's great to have like the second opinions, and it's great to have those other eyes. Kind of watching what's going on, and we kind of work together as a team to help the member figure out what is wrong with the fish and what's the best treatment.
I try to jump in there when I can. I'm just so busy.
I understand you're busy. Yeah, I know you're busy with the store. Trust me. So, okay. So one question we have here is from Tanknicians. Hope I'm saying that right. Says no tank transfers and observations. So I guess what they're wondering is, what is your process then to transfer the fish from the quarantine system into the retail system? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I know Jeff has went over this as well, and that's why with the way I do it, he does it the same way, and I don't have any problems with it whatsoever. They get put into a plastic tub, wheeled out on a cart. They go through water transfer method, clean container, dirty container, transfer method. So I take water out and transfer water in, and then they all get netted, put into the batch of tank water separate from that water, and then they get netted out of that bucket with a separate net.
Okay. So that's to be sure nothing gets transferred over from quarantine into retail. I meant to ask you too, are there any, I know you said you're a proponent of freshwater dips. Are there any dips or baths that you do on the fish before they go into quarantine?
I do not. If there's something visibly wrong that you could see, yeah. But
okay.
Doing a formalin bath prior to administering formalin on them,
yeah, pretty rough.
That's rough. That's on the insides.
Yes.
As a hobbyist, water transfer method, man. Like buying one fish, do water transfer method. Have 4 5-gallon buckets filled up with 2 gallons of water with air sewn in a heater. Change one of those out every day. You can get away with that. Doing this at this level, you can't. I wish.
Right.
Yeah. But going through that amount of water.
Yep.
Yeah. But a hobbyist, I think water transfer method, over, the appropriate period of time is probably the safest for that fish. Because it's not being exposed to medications. But, that is also another thing that can get tricky if you don't know what you're doing. So let the experts do what we do so you can take all the frustration out of trying to QT at home and just come get nice, good, healthy fish.
Right. You get to enjoy, you do all the hard, dirty work, and they get to enjoy the hobby and enjoy the fish. So there's a couple of your customers on here. There's a Michael Hans. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, Michael Hans from Alameda. Shout out. He's a school teacher. So
okay. He says, just picked up a beautiful Atlantic blue tang from Kenny yesterday. Joshua says, bought a copper band from Kenny and can confirm it is eating like a pig. And that's awesome. That's awesome, for a copper band butterfly.
Josh got that copper band yesterday.
Okay. Wow. And it's already eating in his display tank.
In there with the giant Achilles tang and powder blue tang and a bunch of other stuff. So it's a good sign.
Relapse Reefer says, I have to check out this shop next time I'm down in California. Jeff wants to come Fish Hotel. He wants to come visit you the next time he's in California, he says here.
Heck yeah.
Small sample size, but I'm 6 for 6 with Kenny's fish living so far. That's from Thomas.
Thomas, yes. Nice.
Another customer.
Isn't bad.
No, go ahead.
6 for 6, not bad.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's 100%, right? SAF1, Scott, he's one of the administrators on my forum. The 8-hour drive around from LA to California is amazing. The 8-hour turnaround from LA to California to San Francisco is amazing. To Oakland.
Yeah, take the one.
So Joshua says, I have 16 fish in my tank right now, 14 from Kenny, and all of them are doing great. Anecdotal, but all of them were eating within an hour and settled extremely quick. So I guess he's bought 14 of his 16 fish from you, and they're all doing great. That's got to make you feel good, huh?
Who was that?
Joshua.
Oh, yes. Nice.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to spell the last name. Azebedo. Yeah.
Yeah. 14 fish. So that's 14 out of 14?
I guess. Yeah, he just says he has 16 in his tank and 14 came from you. So
nice. That's awesome.
That's going to make you. Casey wants to know shipping for the future. I guess.
Shipping, yeah, I forgot to hit on that. Okay. When you asked about plans for the future, I forgot. Yeah, that is definitely in the future. Hopefully within the, it'd have to be a two-parter. I'd have to hire an employee. I'd have to get the shipping set up, oxygen tanks, all that good stuff. So yes, that is in the future. Maybe I don't even want to shoot a number out there. Let's say like maybe by the end of the year.
Okay, so maybe by the end of 2023, people will be able to start.
Let's bring it in the new year with shipping, maybe.
Okay, and I can tell you right now on the forum, because we have the vendors we do have on the forum that ship are super backed up. They're selling fish as fast as they can quarantine them. So through the forum, we could probably give you all the customers you can handle. for if you want to start shipping your quarantine fish. And my wife will be happy because I won't have to jump back in the game and sell quarantine fish.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it. Yeah, I'm going to do it eventually. So Indies Green says, do you ship outside the USA? I don't think that will ever actually happen because of the whole.
I don't think we can.
Yeah, you can't. You can't do it, I don't think.
I don't think you just have to have CITES and all that stuff.
So someone, well, I guess it's a question for me. Thoughts on his 16-day copper course versus year adjusted 30-day. So basically, I think, okay, here's the thing. A lot of people don't understand. So if you're using just one quarantine tank, so if you're saying, hey, look, I've got one tank and this is where I'm going to do my quarantining, and then I'm going to do my post-quarantine observation and everything. I'm going to do everything in this one tank before I move the fish into my DT. Then yes, you have to treat for 30 days because you have to treat with copper for 30 days and deworm because you're using one tank. When you're doing like Kenny does and like I advocate on my forum, if you're able to have a separate quarantine tank and a separate observation tank, so now you have two tanks to work with, as long as they're 10 feet apart, you can treat with copper and formalin for 14 days, or you do it for 16 days, and then you can transfer the fish into a separate observation tank because within 7 days, any velvet or ick will have dropped off the fish. The presence of therapeutic copper shields the fish from reinfection. The only thing that will be left over in that quarantine tank are tomums that may be insisted to like the glass or the pumps or the heaters or whatever. So you're transferring the fish away from any problems that are still in the quarantine tank. You're putting them into a fresh observation tank, and that's why the 14 or in your case 16-day method does work. But if you only got one tank to work with, yeah, you have to do 30 days in copper because you can't transfer the fish away from the tomont stage. You have to wait the tomonts out, thus the 30 days. So I don't know I get questions about that all the time because most forums and most people that do quarantining advocate 30 days. Nothing wrong with 30 days, except I just feel like if that's too long for fish to be in copper, if it can be avoided, because copper
at therapeutic level.
Right, as long as you keep it at a therapeutic level.
No, it's bad on the fish, especially at therapeutic level for 30
days. Yeah, and like my wife, she's listening here, and she says, sometimes there are certain fish that in the last week or two they'll actually stop eating in copper because they've been in if you're doing it for 30 days because they've been in therapeutic copper for too long. The side effects start to kick in, the lethargy kicks in, the heavy breathing kicks in, they don't want to eat anymore. So then you're after 30 days you're lowering the copper level, but you have a fish that's stressed, it's immunocompromised, it hasn't eaten. So I just personally prefer to do the 14 or 16-day transfer method if you can do it, but the downside is you have to have two tanks. You have to have a quarantine tank and an observation tank, and not everybody's got the space to do that. So
that was one main thing when I was looking for a building was to have a space that was separate, far enough away from everything that I could do what I wanted to do here.
Right, and that's the other thing, aerosol transmission. I know some people may not be familiar with this, but they did a study with velvet and they were able to transfer aerosolized droplets from marine velvet disease up to 10 feet. It was under extreme conditions, but I just try to tell people, just observe a 10-foot rule between your QT and all other tanks, observation tanks, your DT, and everything else.
I don't know if you, but in that QT room, I do have an air purifier that I run in there. I don't know if that could possibly suck out any sort of aerosol-related velvets at all, but I just do it for preventative maintenance anyway.
Can't hurt. Yeah, my wife's listening. She says it definitely can't hurt. Yeah, and I tell people too, you can use fans too. Some people tell me they're like, well, look, I can't do the 10-foot thing. I'm like, well, can you at least have like a fan blowing at your QT tanks away from the observation or your DT? Because look, every little bit helps. It's just little things you can do. It doesn't cost you anything extra that can help with it. So Joshua asks, how did you settle on your QT protocol, and why is Humblefish such a good resource for QT?
The way I settled on my QT protocol was because of Bobby and his forum. I felt like it was the most bulletproof method it could come across, basically at an industrial level, doing it, on a large scale.
Okay.
That's how I, was through you, man, in your forum. That's where I came across my method.
And
Or
the proof is in the pudding. You got a 95% success rate using my method. So
I'm real curious to see what Jeff's doing with this tea tree oil. That could be a great thing.
Yes, yeah, for urine. He says that since we were talking about it, since he started doing it, he's using it mostly for urinema, but the copper bands are doing a lot better for him. Now he doesn't have a wholesaler he doesn't have a wholesaler like Quality Marine that's nearby, and I think he actually transships some fish. So these fish are in bags for like days sometimes. Yeah. So he's running them through like the copper bands. I think he told me before in tea tree oil before they go into QT, and he's increased the success rate because butterflies are prone to urinema too.
Yeah, and then would that help with like maybe potential like ammonia burns from the bags? Maybe being in the bag too long and having potential ammonia burn.
I'm not sure about ammonia burn. I know tea tree oil is used to treat sometimes bacterial infections. So if the fish came in with say harmful surface bacteria, it could help with that. I mostly advocate methylene blue baths for ammonia burn.
Yeah.
If you got a fish comes in, you can see the red, the inflammation on the gills. I tell people to do a methylene blue bath, and it's pretty gentle. Fishman Chemical, which actually everything Aquatics is reselling it now, sells. It's called nitrofurazone green powder, which is a formulation of nitrofurazone. There's another antibiotic like a sulfa drug and methylene blue. That's a great pre-quarantine bath to use on your fish because you're getting 2 antibiotics and a methylene blue in one drug that you can do for 30 minutes. But again, the methylene blue is the key component for the ammonia burn. Let's see. Jay Ellis wants to know, is chloroquine phosphate treatment less stressful for fish? So you have any
expert on that? I think there's some fish that might benefit from it. Maybe like green chromies, I think can handle chloroquine phosphate better than they can handle formalin and therapeutic copper. But as far as you will know better as far as internally if it's safer on the fish as opposed to formalin.
So I experimented with chloroquine for a few years. I was fascinated by it. I have to give credit to I don't even know his real name. He's on Reef Central. He goes by Alprazo, and he is very he's into like sharks and stingrays and things like that. Well, those don't tolerate copper. Yeah, so he uses chloroquine. So then we kind of started talking, and it was kind of like, well, if those fish, you use chloroquine, why couldn't you just use it on everything? So I kind of started doing a lot of experimentation with chloroquine. I had very good success with it. There are a couple of caveats. For example, there are certain fish that just won't tolerate it. Oddly enough, hippotangs have a hard time with it. Anthias generally, except for maybe leertails, won't tolerate it. Fairy wrasses, fairy wrasses are fine. Flasher wrasses, or whatever the genus is, like the 6-line wrasses, those don't. I had really bad experience using chloroquine on those. It really worked well, and the nice thing about chloroquine is it treats. So it's basically a replacement for copper and formalin because it treats ick, velvet, brook urinema. But some fish have toxicity issues when exposed to chloroquine for too long. I started noticing around the 3-week point, some fish would stop eating, which sometimes happens with fish and copper. So I found chloroquine works best if you do a 2-week treatment and then transfer them into an observation tank. The other thing about chloroquine to know is it's susceptible to biodegradation. So you have to sterilize your quarantine tank pretty often because if enough bacteria builds up in that tank, bacteria starts to grow on the glass and the heater and all that. It's actually going to degrade the medication below therapeutic. And because there's no practical test kit like there is with copper, you have no way of knowing, like the standard dosage is 40 milligrams per gallon. you have no way of knowing if the medication has degraded below that therapeutic level. So it's a great drug. There's just caveats to using it, I feel.
Yeah.
So Brian Danella, if I'm saying that right, so grateful to have a proper QT store near me. Kenny has been so helpful. So it must be another one of your customers.
Yes, Brian Danella. Yes. I believe he was a beginner that started up, ordered a tank for him, and have helped him with the cycling process and getting him fish. I believe that's the same person. I have a lot of customers.
It's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. Joshua says, I think he might have been referring to the last fish he bought from you, or one of the fish. It ate 15 minutes after I added it. Actually, we were shocked in a good way. Again, that's awesome that you can add a fish 15 minutes later, it's eating. You know, how often does that ever happen?
I baby these things, man. You know.
Alyssa asked, where are you in Cali? Would love to visit. So go ahead and,
Once
give us again. Yeah, give us all the information.
Oakland, California, 2819 MacArthur Boulevard, Oakland, across from San Francisco. HighTideAquatics.net. Instagram is High Tide Aquatics Oakland, as well as Facebook. And then I have a YouTube channel, High Tide Aquatics. Or it might be High Tide Aquatics Oakland.
So Tanknicians says, Kenny says he doesn't transfer into observation, though, that I must understand. So I think what they're wanting to know is, like, I guess they're wondering if there's an observation system that's in between your quarantine and retail. There's no way you can do that. I mean, you don't have enough tank space for that. They go from quarantine into the buckets. You do some transfers, and then they go into retail. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So they're not sitting in a separate system for days at a time. They're going into tank transferred water and getting transferred. Basically, it's like almost like doing a bucket transfer method at a little bit larger level.
Right.
But, getting them away from those tomots and then transferring the water. There's nothing left behind in there.
Right. Right. So I guess maybe another question: do you
nets? I don't play around with nets. Like I use one net and then one net and then another net. Everything gets, everything has its stages.
Strong biosecurity measures to ensure nothing gets transferred into the retail systems. So are the fish held in retail for any amount of time before they're sold, or how does that work? Like once they go into retail.
I showed you all the fish sit out here. They move out here and sit in those tanks with no copper. And if anything, I'm very confident in my quarantine protocol, because if anything slipped through, there goes all those fish in that system.
Right.
And I have, powder blues and black knock angels in there and stuff. Like, you will see something on those fish if there's something in there. But there's no copper, so I'm not hiding anything.
Right.
I'm running hypo and copper and causing disease suppression.
Right.
If they got something, you're going to see it, and I'm going to know it because my fish are going to die.
So that's an important points, because the fish are in full salinity. There's no copper, no hypo that would be possibly suppressing diseases. So it's not going to take long. If cross-contamination occurred, if a diseased fish made it into retail, you're going to know it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then I'm not going to be selling fish for a while, because I'm going to have to break down my system and re-sterilize and start over.
Right. And I think it's important for people to understand there's no such thing as 100%. Look, there are always risks. All you can do is do the very best you can do with the circumstances that you have to work with, and what you have to work with to ensure that it doesn't happen. It sounds like you're doing everything possible to ensure that the fish are clean.
Right.
Right.
That's why I mentioned the 98% thing, is because, this isn't 100% bulletproof.
Right.
But I would much rather take 98% than gambling 50-50 and going that route as a hobbyist, and, just taking that dice roll.
Right.
Everyone craps out. The house always wins.
Right. So do you advise your customers, like I know some vendors that do quarantine their fish, they will advise their customers, say, hey, look, just for your own peace of mind, put them in an observation tank for a week or two, or do you tell them put them right in their DT?
Right in the DT. I mean, if they want a peace of mind of observation, yeah. But some people ask, do I need to QT these further? No. They've had enough meds that they can get. If you really want to do an observation tank, go for it. But no, I recommend right to the DT.
Okay.
As soon as you get them home, no drip acclimation because the salinity is the same. Just a little bit of water transfer and then get them in your tank. They want to get out of that bag. Like when I add fish from my QT tanks or from the fish system into one of my displays, they get scooped up in a net, walked over to the display, and dropped in.
Right. Yeah.
Everything is ran the same here. It's reef levels. So everything's the same tint, same salinity. It makes it much easier on the fish.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, you don't have that prolonged acclimation period. Mr. Lago asked, how many days after introducing a fish to your display tank do you worry if they haven't started eating? So
I'm assuming this is somebody that might have just bought a fish at a store of some sort and they're concerned that the fish isn't eating. A 1 day mark is kind of normal for a fish that's stressed out that hasn't gone through something like what we're doing here where we're babying these fish. But yeah, if a fish hits 2-3 days without eating, then there's something going on. Either that fish is sick or it's stressed out or you haven't been giving them the right foods, and keep trying more foods.
Right. Exactly. Let's see. Frags to Fishes once asked, how do you handle a situation where you sell a fully quarantined fish and someone adds it to a system where they don't quarantine everything, like say corals or inverts or other fish, and the fish gets sick? So they're basically trying to blame you for selling them a sick fish and it wiped out their tank. How do you handle that situation?
Well, I have, no saltwater stores have guaranteed on their fish. Doing what I do here, I feel like it's a duty to the customer to provide some sort of guarantee, because I'm basically guaranteeing them that their fish, not 100% guaranteed. I explain that to people, but I'm providing them with a fish that should be quality, quarantine, conditioned fish. So if something happens with that fish, I've had customers that have just had a fish die for no reason after getting it from me. I've replaced. I've felt bad. I give people discounts if they want to reorder another one. So like if you bought a whitetail bristletooth tank from me and 2 weeks later that tank died, you come get another one. I'll give you 30% off on it or something like that. But as far as all the other fish, and for me to blame, I know that wasn't the deal, because I could look at that fish system out there and know that there's nothing coming from those fish.
Right.
But yeah, I'm very, very good about taking care of any sort of problem that may arise. And it's always my concern to make sure that those customers' fish are healthy. And, if they have any concerns, they can always email or call. Like, oh, my fish isn't eating. Where were you feeding it? And I tell them, boom, and all of a sudden they're eating.
Right. Yeah, because it's like, maybe some people, some people watching may not understand diseases are not just confined to fish. Diseases are waterborne transmissible. So if, for example, like if you have a sick fish in one of your observation tanks or your retail system, it's going to spread to all the fish. You're going to see it yourself because, the water, the parasites, they're transmitted in the water. So,
that's why for me too, it's kind of nice having that system with no medications in there, because if I was running hypo and running low doses of copper, which is kind of what other retail stores do, that causes disease suppression. So if those fish are sick, I wouldn't know.
Right.
And I keep selling sick fish. So having no copper in that system and having it at the right salinity, if something did get through, I'm going to know it very quick, like within a couple of days.
Right. Exactly.
And then it gets shut down and pulled, and I don't sell fish.
Right. And that's awesome. That's taking accountability for what you do, Joshua asked, you talked a bit about expert only fish not being as difficult as people think with the proper care, What about the opposite? What fish do you think are harder to care for than people think? So I guess fish that are, the perception is that they're easy, but they're really not.
Fish are not easy to care for. No fish is easy to care for, honestly. Um, they take a lot of special care. I mean, just having your water in your tank, like having that up to speed, big, healthy enough for fish to swim in, let alone compatibility, stresses, fish not eating, diseases, like you go down the whole list of all that stuff.
Yeah, I think there's two fish in particular. Everybody, if chromis. People don't realize that chromis carry they can be rampant with urinema, and that's a horrible disease to get. And the perception is they're kind of these pretty little green fish that are easy, but they're not. Clownfish are another one. People don't realize that clownfish, yeah, we're Brooklinella, So
oh yeah, they're
yeah.
brook magnets, and we call brook the clownfish disease.
Yeah, because they can have Brooklinella. But like you say, yeah, clownfish could be aggressive too and mess with all your other fish. So, okay, we've got another question. Do you do anything special for Achilles tangs in quarantine? So how do you quarantine an Achilles tang?
For Joshua, I just did a Achilles white cheek hybrid, which was amazing looking. As far as anything special, are you referring to aggression, like keeping them away from bullying on people? Because my experience with Achilles are, they're freight trains.
I think some people okay, this is just my experience quarantining them. I try to give them like a lot of like crazy like flow because they're usually collected in crest zones, and they're used to a lot of turbulent water and high water with high oxygen content. So I know I will they'll be in a lot of flow. I take my wave makers, I point them to the surface, so there's a lot of gas exchange going on in the quarantine tank. That's kind of the I think one of the big things that people don't do when you quarantine an Achilles tang is you have to provide them with that turbulent water, high oxygen environment. But other than that, they seem to tolerate medications, copper, prazi, pretty well. They seem like they eat pretty well. And I just tell people, look, I mean, depending on your size tank, you put that in your DT, it's going to be a tank boss. I mean, it's a Ferris tank. It is what it is,
Absolutely. And actually, when I did that Achilles for Josh, I put in a CJ 2.0 in there, and that thing was blasting water all around. And he was always aimed right towards it. Just
yeah,
riding that wave.
Yep, they really like strong water flow. So the person Supra Salty Reefer says, I've heard their slime coat is thinner than other tangs, so they are more prone to ick.
I mean, I'm treating every fish as if they have it.
Right. So so that's just kind of the thing. It's like if you take an Achilles tang and you don't quarantine it and it happens to have ick, you put it in your DT. Yeah, it's gonna it's gonna wipe everything out because they do. That whole genus of tangs has a thicker slime coat than even like a zebrasoma, like a yellow tang or something. So they're more. So they're not so much. They're not harder to quarantine per se, but they are more prone to parasites, susceptible, to parasites. Thank you. So all the more reason to quarantine them,
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions, and it's been an hour and 24 minutes, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So, Kenny, any final thoughts? And, if you want to go ahead and give one more plug at the very end, and go ahead.
Yeah, keep up doing what you're doing, Bobby. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing here if I didn't have guidance from you and if I wasn't experienced to what you were doing, with all this quarantining and making it shared to the masses. So thank you for that, and keep it up. Looking forward to seeing more talks from you. I'll throw another plug. It's hightideaquatics.net. Once again, hightideaquatics.net. And we are in Oakland, California. It's beautiful out here too. It's like 76.
Okay. And what are your hours? You're open 2 Tuesday to Sunday, what are your hours?
Yeah, Tuesday through Sunday. I'm closed Mondays. Tuesday through Saturday is 11 to 6, and Sunday is 12 to 5.
Okay. Awesome. So you want to buy some corals or quarantine fish, or you want to just talk to Kenny, stop on by.
Yeah, it's a cool shop. I know you guys got a little glimpse of it, but you know, I really try to create a space and a vibe in here and just make it like a, you know, this hobby is therapeutic. So your shop should be therapeutic as well, not chaos, you know.
Yep. So one last question, then we'll definitely go. Okay. So Tony asks, with an observation tank, once you have removed the fish out, how many weeks should you leave it empty before reintroducing either another fish or corals?
I mean, well, you know better, but my thoughts on this are, is he referring to a quarantining system, QTing fish, and then transferring those to an observation tank? Or I didn't get that question just right.
I don't know. It says with an observation tank, once you've removed the fish out, how many weeks should you leave it empty before introducing either another fish or corals? Well, from my way of thinking, as long as the observation period went well, the fish was yeah, I mean, and the fish has been transferred to the DT. I mean, if we're talking about an observation tank, not a quarantine tank, or even a quarantine tank, you should be able to add fish immediately because that tank should be clean.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you did it right.
Yeah, because some people actually use an observation tank for both fish and corals.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, as long as you're confident that the tank is pathogen free, you can use it, I would say, straight away. So, okay. Well, thank you, Kenny, for being on. And I look forward to High Tide Aquatics, seeing what the future holds. And I hope you start shipping fish soon because that's what we really need.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a go. So, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And I want to announce, hang on, let me announce, you talk a little bit more because I need to pull up who is our next, going to be on the show next. I'm pretty sure it's Vince. I want to be sure about that. You have any final thoughts before we?
Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Watch some of my videos. And there's great, I do an event here called Cocktails and Coral Talk. Every 2 months, I have a full bar set up with a keg of beer and food.
Oh, wow.
And I have a speaker. So I've had Richard Ross give a talk on algae management. Matt Wandell from Monterey Bay Aquarium gave a talk on expert fish care. Chad Clayton from Reef Nutrition gave a talk on fish and coral nutrition. And I had Charles Delbeek do a presentation on the whole history of the Cal Academy of Science, or the Steinhardt Aquarium, their 212,000 gallon tank, from the start, the build, to where it's at now. That's an awesome one. And then my last talk should be up there this week. I had Austin Lefebvre, the Tingy aquariums. You know what Tingy is?
Yes. Yeah.
So he gave a talk on bulletproof reef keeping, about basically, you know, building a life support system and just having all the functionality and proper maintenance to go into creating a life support system for these special animals.
You know, Austin was the one I was thinking of. You know, he was actually the first one that actually was selling quarantine fish on a commercial level. He actually did it before I did it.
When he was doing Aquabox.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That was pretty awesome. So he was really intrigued when he came here and knew about me doing the whole quarantine thing.
Yep.
So yeah, it's nice to touch on that level with him.
So one other quick question for you. Do you do any like consulting for our tank maintenance if people want to hire you to do that? Is that something you do?
I don't do that because I don't have the capacity to do it because I'm here 7 days a week and I have kids and a life and all that stuff. Eventually down the road, I'll probably do, you know, design builds. I do have a small project in the works for a public aquarium. No names yet. So that is in the horizons, but no maintenance for me. I just don't have it. But as far as consulting, anybody that comes in here, I'm here to share all my knowledge and help you start an aquarium the right way and cycle a tank the right way, or how I think the right way is. And just getting out of the fundamentals that have been around for 3 decades. You know, things have changed. You know,
so free consulting, they just have to come to your shop.
come to my shop, you know, buy something, and I'll talk my ear off.
Awesome. Okay, and I want to also say, yeah, so I double checked. I want to be sure about this. So next Tuesday, July 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern, so that would be 5 p.m. Pacific, I will be interviewing Vince Loves Fish. He works at a local fish store, and he's also into freshwater aquariums, so that will be kind of something different. You know, we'll be talking a little bit about freshwater tanks and everything. So everybody watch that. That'll be in about a week. Well, a week and 1 day, because today's Monday. So, Kenny, I want to thank you for being on. I think this was an awesome experience, and thank you for sharing all the great information, and look forward to interacting with you more and more and more. And I can't wait until you're shipping your fish all over the country.
Awesome. One quick thing too is my local reef club, Bay Area Reefers. I think we're going to do some sort of live stream event with you. Maybe have everybody here at the shop and have a big projector screen and stuff. And we could do like a little Q&A session with you about quarantining and all that good stuff.
Okay, sounds great. I'd be happy. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, local clubs are important. You know, if you guys aren't in local clubs, join a local club. You know, having in-person interaction with other, you know, saltwater fish enthusiasts, you know, is important.
Yes, I agree 100%. There's nothing like having, you know, if you're just lost on something, you know, you make a friend through a local club, they come over, they see what you're doing wrong. Maybe you're trying to plumb a tank, whatever, and they can actually give you that you know, in-person assistance that you need to be more successful. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Your advice than jumping down that internet rabbit hole and chasing all kinds of misinformation.
Yep. Or a tank sitter. Yeah, my wife just said, you know, sometimes if you make friends through a local club, and let's say you get to go on vacation, you know, which, you know, then you actually have you've met someone that you feel comfortable being your tank sitter to watch your tank, and you know they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then you can return the favor when they want to go on vacation. You can be their tank sitter.
Yeah. You know, Richard Ross asks people to watch his tank all the time. Maybe I'll have him come watch all my tanks.
Yeah, put him to work. Say, look, I'm taking a week off. We're going on vacation. You come watch the store for a week.
Yeah, he's about 20 minutes from me, so that's fine.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Kenny, and thank you everyone for watching. And we'll do this again next Tuesday on the 25th of July.
Sweet.
All right.
Peace.
Take care.
Thanks, Bobby.